Rightio. So we're going to move now to the town hall debate, and I'm going to call up Adam to chair this. And we're going to do a bit of musical chairs here, because during this discussion we need to be in tables with at least 5 or 6 people. So if you're at a table with 2 or 3, please join another table that's got a similar number of people. We need tables with 5 or 6 people, so we can have a good discussion. Just to wrap up the event, we've got some really good questions to run through. So if you're on a small table, please just move to another table where there's a few spare seats. It'll make for a better discussion in the end. If you're on your own, you're not going to have much of a discussion. So we've had some questions submitted for this final discussion. Adam's going to run through those and chair this debate. Adam, if you're not familiar with him, he's the research manager of our emissions team covering DEF. He's involved in regular publications that some of you subscribe to, like the DEF Monitor, and also involved in lots of projects over the course of the year in terms of DEF. So, Adam, I'm going to hand over to you to chair this, and we look forward to some good debate.
Thanks, Tim. Okay, so this is an idea that we've tried at some of our conferences around the world. It's the first time it will be happening in North America. The idea is that we've got the expertise in the room to raise a lot of the issues that are pertinent and have been raised over the last couple of days, and also to come up with some interesting comments and solutions on some of the issues that have been raised as well. So looking around the room, we've got people from all along the supply chain and also on the demand side as well. So it's a really good breadth of opinions and ideas that we can draw on. Over the last couple of days, and in fact over the last couple of months, we've been talking continuously to most of you in the market, trying to understand what it is that the key issues that you're tackling day to day. And so just as a guide, we've drawn up some questions that you can, in your teams, in your tables, can discuss. We'll have a 20-minute or half an hour period where you can discuss it in your tables, and then we'll allocate a team leader from each table to return the feedback on each of the questions as it comes in. In most cases, I can see that I've got a colleague on most tables, so I'm sure they'll volunteer themselves if no one else wants to do the speaking on your behalf. And we'll collate all the notes from all the feedback, put it in some well-constructed form, and send that out with the conference report later in the week. So, what are the things that have been coming up in discussion over the last couple of months and in the last couple of days as well? Well, we've clearly got a growth industry, and the volumes are growing at roughly 20% a year, 100 million gallons a year. That, of course, is a good news story, but with any growth of that scale and that magnitude and that speed, there's going to be challenges. So the first question really relates to what are the challenges as you see it from the level of growth that we're seeing in the industry? And some of the options for discussion is, so you can take any of these or none or all, are the transportation and logistics issues that come up from the rate of growth in the industry, the ability to source urea either as prill or in solution, some of the issues around material handling and storage. We know that the transfer of liquid is a big source of contamination, and so that's an interesting topic for discussion. And then finally, quality is an issue that comes up in every market around the world. There's always complaints about what people are doing on the quality side of things. So we'd be really interested to get your ideas on what those issues are, how they manifest themselves, and also what can be done about them. Now, the second point is, without wishing to break any antitrust rules or anything like that, but to discuss this issue of the NOLA urea benchmark being a suitable reference for DEF pricing. There's many views on that, and it's one that maybe we can have a constructive discussion about, well, should it be maintained? And if so, why? And if not, what alternatives are there that are practical and viable and available to us at this point in time? The third point that we would suggest is the one around legislation, just to get a consensus on what people's views are in terms of how they think legislation will be impacted by the new administration, what would happen at a state level should things change at a federal level, and how we expect GHG phase 2 to roll out, and ultra-low NOx standards as well, and the role of CARB in all of this as well. So another big topic for discussion. And then finally, any other business. So it's your opportunity to raise any topic or any gripe or any positive thing that you've come across in the last couple of years with regards to the industry, and bring it to your peers and discuss it in public. So without too much more talking from me, because this is really your forum to take over, I'd encourage you to take those points and your own and discuss them for the next, let's say, 20 minutes, and then I'll come around and see how you're getting on, and then we'll have a feedback session thereafter. So, over to you. Okay, we're just over the 20 minutes, in fact, and given that we're running a little bit late anyway, maybe we use the next couple of minutes to draw together some of our thoughts, and then we'll feedback thereafter. Okay, so on a positive side, there's a lot of talking, so that's good. It means there's been a lot of discussions. Maybe some of those discussions are slightly unfinished, but just for the sake of time and so that you can hear everything that's been happening in the room, I think we start the feedback session now. If I can ask one of my colleagues to take notes on the general, maybe Alex, if you could do that, if that's possible, on the feedback, if you could take the notes as they come in, please. Okay, so let's start at the back table. Ali, you're going to speak on behalf of it? Yeah, okay. Come on, don't be shy.
Let someone else talk.
Okay. So I would suggest that we begin it, because just hearing what was happening, it seemed that there was a lot of different conversations happening. So maybe if you stand up, whoever chooses to do it, and you give an indication of the main topics that were discussed, and then go into some of the detail on what was covered. So.
Well, I'm not going to be very good at explaining this like
You'll
they
be
are.
excellent. Go on.
So yeah, we talked about the challenges first. One of the first things that was brought up was predicting the volumes as it relates to storage and pricing. Are you sure you don't want to go on?
All right, I'll try to wing this the best that I can. This is going to be hard not to speak from my own perspective, so I'll try to remember everyone's notes. But the biggest thing for us is, as Aaron Hamby with FedEx, by the way, is making sure that we have large storage capacity, but not too much. And we talked about the smaller locations, trying to get away from packaged goods and the challenges there. We talked about contamination issues with packaged goods, where in our case, we tend to reuse the packaged goods. We'll dispense into them for driver convenience, things like that. So we've got some really good closed DEF systems, but if we're not using them, that kind of defeats the purpose. Also, the number of SCR vehicles coming online, predicting where those vehicles are going to land and when they're going to land. So we have a pretty good idea of what we base our DEF demand on our diesel demand and the percentage of the trucks that are SCR, but we don't have a really good idea of when the SCR trucks are going to increase, especially because we move our fleet internally. So we move, lower utilized trucks to other locations. We talked about standardization of where the DEF tank is. I think we resolved that. I think we decided it's typically on the left side. We picked on PACCAR a little bit. Apologize for that. But he came through. Another big need, too, which was brought up by Jacobus, I'm sorry I didn't, was visualizing how much DEF is in the tank on the truck, especially in a wet hose situation, or even our drivers that are pulling up to a station and filling. You can't see how much is in there, so when the auto shutoff triggers, you don't know if it's from a splashback or if it's actually full, which in the smaller tank size have a huge impact, especially on, like a mobile fueler that has to come back, in a shorter interval. So that was kind of it on the first question. The second thing we talked about was the price of DF being indexed on the NOLA, which I think everybody at the table decided we didn't like that. And we solved the problem, so we'll be sure and give that to Integer at the end of the conference and get some credit for that. there was some speculation as to the possibility that the NOLA could be, the price could be influenced, manipulated. We didn't accuse anybody of that, but we've got some expertise at the table that we were concerned that maybe that's an inflated price at times. And then from my perspective, we don't know what the margins are for the companies that are delivering DEF to us. We just know what the price is. So we're not able to negotiate that, so it makes it difficult for us. I think that was it. Yeah, we had some good discussions on the first two, and we didn't finish the last. So.
Okay. On the NOLA point, I think the issue you hear less is that it's vulnerable to manipulation. In some respects, it provides some transparency. It's just that the issue you hear more is the relevance to someone, let's say, around the Rockies or high up on the West Coast, whether that reference is really applicable to them. But interesting points as well on the practical side of filling and so on from a user's perspective. That's really interesting points brought up there. With regards to the SCR vehicles, yeah, it's difficult because it's easy enough to track the sales, and it's conversations that we've been having today. In fact, in private meetings I've been having, that you're getting to a stage now where EPA 10 obviously came in 2010. You're 7 years down the line, and as we heard from Ryder, the replacement on many of the bigger fleets is 7 years or less in some respects. So you're getting to a situation now which is really for the first time where SCR is replacing SCR, whereas that was never the case before. It was always old trucks with non-SCR were being replaced by SCR trucks. So that's another complication that goes into this idea of figuring out where, how, when, and the impact of new sales of trucks as they come on. So yeah, the picture is getting more complex from a consumption point of view, I think, than it has been recently. Maybe if we move to the next table, I don't know who's going to volunteer to speak from you guys. Me? Well, I was at the table. I'll give an indication, and then maybe we can dig into the detail. But one of the things that came up was around the quality standard and the validity of the ISO standard for practice as it works now. So maybe if we could have some more detail from our chemist on the table.
Okay, well, all I was saying, which I said at some of the sessions, is that the original ISO standard was probably 15 years ago when this started in Europe, and they were trying to come up with a bulletproof quality standard for DEF to not affect the catalyst. I've talked to enough catalyst people at these research conferences to know they just picked almost whatever the lowest detection limit was of these different metal ions, for example. And now we have enough experience with this industry that I think a reasonable, I mean, as this industry grows, the amount of testing, amount of cost of samples being FedExed across the United States to labs to get tested. And I'm sorry, but I'll say it. I know at Old World we are very diligent about this. We put in $1 million lab. We test every batch. I know a lot of people don't. And as this industry is going to be 3 times this size, it's just the volume of tests are too much. And my biggest example that I was saying is, for example, the metal ions in the standard. If you sum up the limit of all the metal ions, I can't remember exactly. Let's say it adds to 5 parts per million, but the standard has a limit for each one, like sodium 0.2, calcium 0.5, magnesium 0.2, whatever. If you add all those up, it's about 5. If you made a sample of DEF and they were at the limit of all those metal ions, you would be at 4.5 parts per million and you would pass. If you made up a batch of DEF and every metal ion was 0 except sodium was at 0.22, you would fail. And that's ridiculous. These are all poisons to the catalyst in equal severity, and if the sum of all those metal ions equals 4 parts per million, a very simple change to the standard to say here are the limits for each metal ion. Any one of them or 2 of them can be exceeded as long as the total is not greater than 4, for example. Just that one change would enormously simplify things. I mean, we in 1,000 testing of our DEF batches have never a single time ever had our total metal ions exceed that limit. But yes, on occasion, a sodium will be 0.22. Well, now we have to take that batch, go do something with it, solve it into fertilizer, blend it off with something else. It's a ridiculous expense for no reason. So, yeah, there's my speech.
Yeah, it's an interesting point, and it plays into this idea of as the volumes grow, and we're talking about 700 million gallons now, it will quite quickly be above 1 billion. You're not, these costs become exponentially large with any unnecessary, let's say, quality checks that are causing failure.
Yeah, I mean, to do if you really do the testing as it's properly supposed to be done, it is outside of the urea and transportation. It's the highest cost of. It's cost more than the blending to do all this analytical, and the FedEx amount. I can't tell you the amount of dollars spent just FedExing samples everywhere, and then because this is a batch process in some respects, if you really go by this standard and the retain policy, come on, this is going to be a 2 billion gallon industry. You need a room. Our room already is the size of that part of the conference room for antifreeze and DEF, and I can't imagine what it'll be 5-6 years from now.
Anyone want to add to that or comment on that at all? Because this is. It's unusual that you get a comment which is saying that mainly when you speak to DEF suppliers, they will talk about how much effort they're putting into their quality checks and how that differentiates them from the competition. But I mean, you hear it from many people. So this is an interesting development in the idea that, and it came up yesterday as well, that to try and sell this idea of actually slightly untightening the standards it's an interesting development, and maybe one that can be developed over the next year, and we'll talk about it at the next forum with more certainty. We're going to get a follow-up.
Yeah, it won't happen in my career, and maybe not my lifetime. But that's why I asked questions about ASTM. ISO meets once every 7 years.
Yeah.
I mean, my God, that's you can get 2 PhDs in that time. ASTM at least meets twice a year. And I've been a part of them for 25 years, and they're glacially slow. But still, they could take this current standard. And what's nice about ASTM, for those who don't know, it's an equal, every committee has to be an equal mixture of OEMs, producers, and end users. So it's a good mix, and every standard has to be unanimously approved. So no one group can ride herd over another group. And if someone has a negative or disapproves of a standard or some language in a standard, it gets discussed by the whole larger group. And yes, that person could be overridden with a 2/3 vote. I mean, it's a very complex procedure. But the net of it is, when you come out with a standard, it is approved by OE, end user, producer. It's very well written. And if we took this on ASTM as a group, it might take 5 years.
Yeah.
But we could probably come up with something that is got some more science logic to it than just what exists today.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's move on to the next table. So if we come here, I don't know who your designated speaker is.
Anyone like to start? Yeah, I can do start. Yeah, sure. Okay, so we sort of bypassed the first point, went kind of straight to point number 3.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, so obviously the future's kind of really shrouded in a lot of uncertainty. We've heard this week that the EPA will have announced that they're going to extend their discussion about the trailer revision for another 6 weeks. So it will likely push back the first phase of that for GHG2. Then we move next on to pricing with the NOLA price index being kind of beautifully described by Ken here, but yeah, if you want to join in.
So the question really was around supply. And if you look at it from a urea producer's perspective, North America trades about 12 million tons of urea a year. We can double the DEF demand, and that's still only going to make something less than 2 million tons of total demand of urea into the DEF market. So it's going to be around 10% of the total supply. So really, supply is not going to be the issue. There's going to be lots of points where you can pull the product from. The bigger issue is how does that get priced, and does the NOLA plus concept still hold, or do you start to look at more kind of regional pricing, out of those supply points, like the ag business as it currently is priced, which is more of a alternative market price kind of structure. So we think that's going to probably happen. The other thing we had a very good conversation about, and this one makes a lot of sense in my mind, is around we were still very early in the evolution of this product, and as we go further down the path, do you start to see some movement into some kind of proprietary type additive packages, et cetera, that get into the DEF, that enhance performance, that basically takes it away from being a commodity and makes it more like motor oils. So motor oils are, base oil is a relative straight product, but nobody sells it on the basis of the base oil. Everything is sold on the basis of the final product, which is proprietary and unique to whatever company. So are we going to start to see the market evolve that way? Those were kind of my two takeaways.
Yeah, no, I think it's really clear. Also on the point about the NOLA price index, I think the nature of the DEF market is that most people want quite stable DEF prices. And with the volatility of NOLA, particularly even recently, as it always has been, it's kind of unnecessary price volatility that isn't reflected in retail prices, isn't usually reflected in short-term prices by any of the major distributors, and that's one of the kind of key kinks that it doesn't mean that the NOLA is reflective of the business we're in.
Interesting.
But yeah, and then the other points on motor oil I think is very interesting. Obviously, following the talk we just had, ways to have a kind of USP to a product that at the moment is identical across brands, and having that loyalty that have seen for years in lubricants seems like an interesting next step.
Yeah.
Given where we are.
A lot of that comes through service and so on, and the ability to provide with minimum fuss and easy payment terms or easier payment terms and so on. Maybe
I really hate to do this. We have the Southwest Research Tour, and there's a bus downstairs waiting for everyone. We ran a little over time.
Let's just give them the chance to speak.
Okay,
I think, and then
if we could kind of run through it quite quickly, because people have flights to catch later, and we want to make sure that we can all get down there.
Sure.
I'll do this quickly. A lot of the points already came up, but one that hasn't come up is one of the challenges is putting DEF into existing facilities. Rick from PEI said if anything in his member group, there's not enough expertise on how to help customers put DEF tanks into existing truck stops or facilities like at Ryder. So it would help as the market matures for that expertise to be around. Space is a challenge at existing facilities. Spikes in demand are difficult to predict. Sometimes trucks come on stream and tanks get empty, and then even suppliers struggle to catch up with empty tanks when their distribution system isn't developed enough. So the market needs to develop, suppliers need to develop more robust ways of addressing changes in demand. And even interruptions at urea plants cause problems for distributors and suppliers of DEF because they have to find other sources. Then on the regulations, we all agreed nothing new is going to happen really with the current administration. So we thought that whatever's in place will happen, and whatever is coming in the future will probably take a long time to be achieved. And then finally on the urea, the second point on the NOLA, the two in our group that are buyers of DEF and urea felt that NOLA was a good basis and allowed for some simplicity in their pricing, and it seemed like a good approach.
Okay, thanks very much. All right, mindful of the fact that we don't have much time, I'll just run through then quickly as a summary. On point one, it seems that the majority of the issue around the growth of the market and the growth of usage is on the storage side and also the delivery side in terms of both usage in the vehicle and to the point of usage as well. On NOLA, it's a mixed picture, and I think it really depends on where you stand in the industry as to what your views are on that. One thing we didn't come up with was a viable alternative, so it looks like that price reference is here to stay unless we're very, very open to discussing that with anyone that wants to talk to us about it at length in the future. But there's always room to improve. There can maybe a diesel component in pricing as well, but something that I think needs probably a longer session than we have here. And finally, on the regulation, I think this was dealt with, over the last couple of days as well, and it doesn't sound like anything new has come up. It seems as if, phase 2, the consensus is it will run ahead as planned. I personally, the role of CARB in this with the ultra null NOx, I think that is a potential stickler for the industry. If they decide to push ahead and then they get some followers and some that don't, you're going to have a much more difficult compliance landscape in the future. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out over the next year or so. And finally, any other business, the one we had was regarding the ISO standard. I think that was explained well. And I think, again, it's an interesting point where the industry could cut cost and maybe improve in terms of making the production process more lean, is if we have a standard that represents what actually is practical and needed for the catalyst to run properly. But bit of a rush summary there, but thank you very much for your participation. Hopefully that was useful, and give yourselves a round of applause. And as you heard, the bus is downstairs, so you better get a move on.